call him the pork hunter. We have Senator Panfilo Lacson. How do you like that name, the pork hunter?
I don't like it, Karen.
You don't like the name, the pork hunter?
Yeah, I'm just doing my job.
Okay, all right. Well, I found it interesting when you were called the pork hunter. But this budget, Senator Lacson, the Speaker assures there's no pork, no insertions, only institutional amendments. So I'll start with, do you believe that, and what's wrong with that?
Well, we have yet to see the transmitted copy of the GAB2, the General Appropriations Bill, as approved on third and final reading, as transmitted to the Senate. Until we see that, we cannot really tell or say if there is pork or none in the House version of the budget.
Okay, you've said yesterday or 2 days ago that amending the budget after it's been passed on third and final reading is unconstitutional. And yet this has been the practice in the lower house.
Yes, that is clearly unconstitutional. It's very clear. There's no other interpretation in that provision under the Constitution na after the third and final reading of any bill, including the General Appropriations Bill, no amendment shall be allowed thereto. I don't see any other interpretation of that particular provision. So since they already passed on third reading the House version of the GAB or the General Appropriations Bill, I see no reason why they will allow a small group or a small committee to introduce further amendments. And based on what I heard from Congressman Eric Yap, who is the Appropriations Chair, Committee Chair, he said that it is that the amendments will not be coming from the congressmen, but from the agencies. Again, that's another violation.
Yeah.
Because we have a four-phase budget process. Budget preparation, authorization, execution, and accountability. We are now under the authorization phase. And only Congress, the Congress of the Philippines, is allowed to participate in the authorization phase. Tapos na yung sa executive department, yung preparation phase, yung execution after mapirmahan ng presidente yung enrolled bill and yung DBM starts dispersing allocations.
Okay.
Doon mag-start yung execution. So they cannot, and the agencies under the executive branch cannot be allowed to participate in the authorization phase of the budget process.
Yeah. Now, in saying that they cannot, Senate President Tito Soto said that he will presume regularity in effect now with the budget that will be transmitted to the Senate. But when it comes to you, Senator Ping, they were able to approve 20 billion pesos worth of institutional amendments. They were able to source 5.5 billion pesos somewhere else for the COVID vaccine purchasing, among many other things. Does this mean you will not recognize the 20 billion pesos in institutional amendments?
Karen, is your reference the small committee output?
Yes, yes.
Well, that is unconstitutional. So to say that there's a presumption of regularity, I think is misplaced, because if that is the input or output of the small committee, and they will include these amendments in the USB drive that they will transmit to us on Wednesday, October 28th, then we cannot presume regularity. With all due respect to my Senate President, because if it is based on an unconstitutional act, then we cannot presume regularity. I'm sorry.
All right. So, but does this mean you will not recognize the 20 billion pesos in institutional amendments that the House clearly will be submitting to the Senate? That's the version I'm sure that will be submitted.
Yeah. It's not a matter of recognizing or acknowledging or accepting whatever amendments they will send to us. Anyway, the budget process has not been completed.
Yes.
And even the authorization phase has not been completed. And that can easily be remedied or cured by the Senate version and eventually yung bicameral conference namin.
Okay.
So, hindi pa naman pwedeng i-declare na unconstitutional yung budget ng 2021, yung General Appropriations Act, kasi wala pa naman tayong naipapasang batas. What I'm only saying is that very clear yung Constitution on either house, both houses for that matter, hindi na pwede kami mag-introduce. Sa Senate, we strictly adhere to that provision.
Yes.
Basta't na ipasa namin on third reading, wala na. Kasi yung between second reading and third reading, merong 3-day rule yan eh. And the only reason for that is to allow the members of the House or the Senate to see for themselves the clean copy of what we had approved under the second reading. Now, wala na pwede mag-introduce kasi on second reading, pag na-approve, yun na yung final version and we cannot alter that anymore even in the third reading. Kasi ministerial yun and that's only to formalize what we have discussed, what we have interpolated and deliberated on the floor, including amendments. So yun ang flow na nakikita natin sa Constitution.
Okay.
Because after third reading, hindi na pwede talaga.
Now, Congressman Yap told you that with these amendments, no fund was sourced in effect from the budgets for the districts, but only from agencies. However, you noticed that there are less national projects now and more local projects. So there's more funding in the DPWH for local projects. There's been controversy in that in the lower house, saying it's an unequal or unequitable distribution of projects. Would you want Senator Ping Lacson, because for example, the COVID vaccine, clearly you need to source out at least 10 billion pesos more. Would you want to get that, for example, from an agency or let's say from infra projects that have been budgeted for districts and they're local projects?
Before that, Karen, ang reference ko doon sa nabawasan yung national projects, mga bridges, national roads, at napunta sa local projects, yung NEP.
Yes.
Because remember, DPWH submitted the addendum, what they call addendum, to sa NEP. And that's still part of the NEP. Yung NEP, nag-expire yon August 26, no? But yung DBM was able to submit the NEP well within the 30-day period, again, as required by the Constitution. Now, nakita namin doon 396 billion pesos worth of lump sum appropriations. So what DPWH did was to submit to DBM, and DBM submitted to the Congress the breakdown of the 396 billion. Part pa rin ng NEP yun, but it was submitted very, very late, 12 days late.
Yes, I remember this.
From the 30-day period as required by the Constitution, kasi September 7. So we consider that as still part of the NEP. And they cannot do that anymore because nung nag-open yung Congress, yung second regular session of the 18th Congress, bumilang tayo ng 30 days. Remember, the President nag-SONA, di ba? Yung State of the Nation Address. After that, within 30 days, August 25, 29 days after, DBM was able to submit to us. So again, that's flawed, because late masyado and hindi na pwede magsabit ng NEP. Dapat yung ginawa na lang sa House, doon sa kanilang House version. But it seems that as per information coming from some congressmen themselves, there was a lot of haggling that went on between DPWH and some congressmen. So much so that DPWH was not able to submit on time. So following that
the premise.
Ang nangyari, that premise, following that premise or assumption na merong haggling, galing na nga talaga sa mga congressmen yung breakdown na sinabit ng DPWH na nag-increase nga yung mga local projects like yung especially multipurpose buildings. We noticed 67 billion pesos worth of multipurpose buildings.
Yeah, I actually saw that in several districts.
May nakita pa kami, Karen, na 1 million uniformly appropriated to several districts. I think around 42 districts all over the country. So what does that mean? Ibig sabihin, ito yung insertions na nga, but inserted already, not anymore under the General Appropriations Bill in Congress, but doon sa NEP as submitted very late ng DPWH.
Yeah. I think for the viewers, so it's clearer to them, because the Supreme Court clearly made a decision on the definition of what pork is. What you're saying is what Congressman did is actually put their projects in through the National Expenditure Program. So even before it gets to Congress, it's already there. But technically, all right, now congressmen may argue that that's not illegal.
Well, the NEP is still under the executive. That's in the preparation phase of the budget process. Maybe it's not illegal, but it's in violation of the budget process. Kasi pag preparation, it starts with the budget ceiling given by issued by the DBM to the different agencies. And then the agencies will be summoned to a budget call. Ito na yung nangyayari ng March, ginagawa ng March. So, sa budget call, they submit a list of their projects, mga PAPs, programs, activities, and projects. And then, DBM, yun nga, August 25, nagsubmit na sila based on the submissions of the agencies.
So Senator Ping, would you suggest...
participate? Yeah.
No, would you suggest then, frankly speaking, that when the budget is submitted to the Senate or transmitted to the Senate, frankly, the multipurpose halls, for example, sa DPWH budget, because it doesn't seem to go with the theme of next year's budget, as you said, of reset, restart the economy, right? Rebound. Would you then suggest, for example, no multipurpose halls for all districts first, except maybe just a few that really need them? But then that's 67 billion that can be put elsewhere. Would you then suggest that? Because you'll have some districts in Metro Manila and even controversial ones that have been brought up na mababawasan talaga ang budget nila.
Yes. And another thing, meron silang tinatawag na yung convergence, special support to agencies. For example, yung DOT, Department of Tourism, meron na doon sa original NEP. Kasi ang nangyari, instead of just simply breaking down the 396 billion na lump sum appropriations, ang nangyari, pati yung the entire budget, 667 billion in all ng DPWH, lahat yung ginalaw, including other appropriations, not anymore within the 396 billion lump sum appropriations. 8.2 billion pesos, tinanggal nila doon sa convergence and special support to agencies. Budget ito ng DO. Ang nakalagay sa description, leading to tourism destinations. Now, Karen, yung tourism sector is one of the hardest hit. Alam naman natin yan na sectors, one of the sectors hardest hit by the COVID-19.
Yes.
Now, why would DBM or DPWH remove delete 8.2 billion pesos worth of infra projects, maybe infra or maybe other programs or activities na connected sa tourism. So it doesn't make sense na kung nagre-recover tayo from the COVID, bakit tatanggalan mo pa ng budget yung tourism that badly needs the budget?
Okay.
Yung maraming issues involved in the DPWH budget kasi nga they mangled, they actually disfigured or mutilated the DPWH budget. Why? Well, ang assumption nga, based on information supplied to us by some congressmen, pinakialaman ng mga ilang congressmen yung budget ng DPWH to be converted into their local constituencies projects.
Okay, and do you see this as, in a way, in preparation for the 2022 elections?
Well, I really don't know. No, I would just like to stick to facts that merong constitutional infirmity pagkatapos yung budget process is not followed. But pagdating sa Senate, we will try to examine all this and discuss among ourselves which of the amendments introduced by the lower house. Kasi yun naman ang function namin Once they submit to us the General Appropriations Bill 2, which is the final version, it is up to the senators to amend further.
Okay.
And then we meet in BICAM to reconcile the disagreeing provisions. Yun ang nasa batas natin, nasa Constitution.
And I wanted to ask you, Senator Lacson, I asked this from former Deputy Speaker El Rey Villafuerte before. I saw, for example, the controversial what was mentioned by Congressman Teves, the CAMSUR budget, the GIG budget, the budget of other districts. I actually looked at them in detail and I noticed it's written in this way. Kunyari, 100 million pesos multipurpose. Next line, 100 million pesos so and so. Next line, 80 million pesos, and it goes on that way. It's holistic figures. There are no exact figures. I asked, would a multi-purpose hall in every single barangay be worth the same?
What you're saying is walang change.
Walang change. Walang change. It's all whole figures.
Alam mo,
Will that
napapansin
pass
din
in
namin
the
yan.
Senate?
Yeah, we also question that, year in and year out.
Yeah, walang
Napansin namin,
sukli.
Bakit laging round figure?
Oo.
When you construct a building, maski pa paano, merong sobrang 18,000 o kaya 15,000. Bakit eksaktong 100 million? So again, ang pwede natin sabihin, lump sum appropriations din ito. And how could you construct a building na ang sinasabi kasi nila, hindi pa nabibid out? And parang ito yung estimate, na gagastusin pagpapagawa ng isang multipurpose building. Well, that's fine, Pero di ba dapat binebet na ito ng DPWH and meron na silang study na ginagawa kung magkano magagastos sa pagpapagawa ng isang multipurpose building or even kalsada, kasi meron na sila mga civil engineers who can estimate, and even estimates would not, amount to round figures.
Okay, so clearly, is it fair to say that you would want funding appropriated for the needs of the country in 2021, coming some from the local projects and not just agencies? Because ang sinabi ni Congressman Yap, ang pinagkunan daw nila, sir, ay mga ahensya din.
Well, okay, kung during the deliberations, because remember, we summon the heads of the agencies, including some other officials of the agencies, and we asked them. So, yun ang input ng executive departments, yung agencies under the executive department. But they course it through the congressmen, through the lawmakers. It is not as if after the third reading or after the second reading, saka palang kukuha ng input from the agencies under the executive branch. At sila na yung nag-amend. That's what I'm saying, na binaviolate natin yung budget process because they cannot participate. It's the exclusive domain or jurisdiction of the legislature.
So what version should the Senate take up, frankly? Is it the one that's been passed on third and final reading, or is it the one that's gonna go after the small committee added 20 billion pesos in amendments?
Well, I don't think we can distinguish anymore, because we have not seen the approved on third reading version. And what they're saying is what they will transmit to us is the approved third reading version.
Okay.
Only, medyo giveaway nga yung mga statements ng ilang congressmen, especially yung House Appropriations Committee Chairman, na yung further amendments will be coming from the agencies and not even from the congressmen. Emphasizing na hindi ito mga pork barrel, kundi institutional because nanggaling sa agencies. Which to me, again, sabi ko nga, paulit-ulit, mali yun kasi tapos na yung role ng executive branch. Budget preparation sila eh. Nasa authorization phase na tayo. Legislation na ito and only lawmakers can participate in legislation. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But having said that, pagdating nung version, final version ng House, we still have to examine yung senators because that's the budget process naman eh.
Okay, you've already had budget briefings, you've been very active there. What are you passionate about na sa palagay po ninyo kailangan dagdagan ng pondo? We already heard from the DOH Undersecretary, the DOH needs at least 12.5 billion for vaccines. 2.5 lang ang nakabudget. So the DOH, for example, do you feel that needs an increase, Senator?
Definitely. Kasi yung 2.5 billion for vaccines, that will cover only 3.9 million Filipinos. And assuming that we have the vaccine by April. So maraming mga ngailangan ng vaccines. If we vaccinate only 3.9 million Filipinos, what happens to the 96 million others? So maghahawa-hawan din yon. And parang trickle in the bucket yung 2.5 billion. So definitely, hindi lang ako, other senators would love to further increase the appropriations for vaccines. Not just for vaccines, kasi yung reset, rebound, recover, theme ng national budget ng 2021 dapat masunod. Para ano pa yung theme kung hindi yun ang ating guide, ano? Kasi ang kanilang facing dito, I think yung emergency phase, tapos na tayo kasi parang hanggang May 2020 yun eh. No? Tapos we are now in the recovery phase, meaning yung June to December nasa recovery and resiliency na itong sa 2021. Now, kung hindi natin i-address o hindi natin susundin yung theme na sinusunod ng executive branch when they crafted the National Expenditure Program, alisin na lang natin yung theme. That is the reason why kaya may parameters, di ba? Kaya nga may theme. Maski kami, doon kami susunod. Pag sinabi nating kailangan maging resilient na tayo, kaya recover tayo, nasa recovery phase from the pandemic, tugunan natin yung pangangailangan ng COVID-19. So why appropriate only 2.5 billion? So definitely, we will support the move of the House na increase pa yon. Ano? Sa akin nga, ang tingin ko, at least 10 billion pesos ang kailangan ng DOH para sa vaccination. O para sa vaccines.
So clearly, gusto mo pa mag-source, sir, ng an additional 2 billion somewhere else to make it at least 10 billion?
No, 2.5 ngayon eh.
Well, sabi nila, sir, nakahanap sila ng 5.5. Opo. So you'd have to source additional.
At least 10 billion dapat.
Okay.
And, okay.
Now, DOLE, for example, the original request of DOLE was a 70 billion peso budget, actually 76. It went down to 27. The House was able to source 4 billion pesos elsewhere. But, many have asked, what can the DOLE give with 27 or even 31 billion on a reset, rebound, restart budget?
Ang problema rin, Karen, yung absorptive capacity. No? We're looking at the unused appropriations based on the statement of appropriations, yung allotments, yung disbursements ng mga agencies. Ang problema, binigyan nilang malaking amount yung DPWH, DOTR, DepEd, and yet, yung 2019 na SAOB, yung sinabi ko kanina, ang nagtatap dito, DPWH, nasa mga 83 billion pesos.
Unspent.
Sa kanila galing ito, documents nila ito, 83 billion pesos yung unused appropriations. And then DOH itself, meron din silang unused appropriations, medyo malaki rin. Parang nasa mga 40, I can't remember the figure anymore, but DOTR, I think 21 billion, 42 billion yung DepEd, yun din ang problema. So, while we are willing to appropriate, are they prepared to absorb the budget para ma-implement nila? Yeah, they cannot spend it kasi yung 2019 SAOB, which is the latest reference kasi wala pa naman yung 2020, hindi pa tayo tapos ng 2020. But year in and year out, ang lalaki lagi ng unused appropriations. So there's also something wrong with their implementation.
Yeah. And I thought, we went through a period of the controversial debate on cash-based budgeting. If it's cash-based budgeting, then ideally, you would only be writing down on what you can spend actually.
Yeah, yung cash-based, hindi naman nasusunod kasi when cash-based budgeting system was introduced, we were forced to pass a joint resolution extending the lifespan of the budget to another year. So parang hindi rin cash-based. And then the following year, ganun na naman, nagpas kami ng batas because of the recent Supreme Court ruling na hindi na pinapayagan yung joint resolution na merong effect ng law. So we passed a law extending the effectivity of the spending authority ng executive department, the entire government bureaucracy, hanggang December of 2021. So ganun din eh. So nagka-cash base, hindi rin naman natin kaya kasi we cannot disburse. Yung disbursement rate, particularly ng DPWH for example, nasa mga 53%. When we say disbursement rate, ito yung kasi meron tayong obligation rate, meron tayong disbursement rate. Na-obligate, hindi naman nagdi-disburse. Or appropriated, hindi naman ito na-obligate. So alam mo Karen, napakahirap intindihin itong budget. 4,000 pages.
Yeah.
And yet, lalo pang pinahihirap ng mga legislator. Sana kami yung mag-simplify. Kasi as it is, the budget is the national budget is a very complicated system already. And it is sad and unfortunate na yung national budget, aka General Appropriations Act, ito yung most violated, if not most abused law that we pass year in and year out.
Okay. Now, in 2019, the president vetoed
95 billion.
Yes, 95 billion. And you were one of those who actually detected and saw the 95 billion. Will you be...
75 actually. 75 billion, yeah. Yung nakita ng mga senador, 75 billion. But when we... Kasi nangyari, Karen, that's even worse, ano? Because yung lower house noon, after ratification, no? Kasi nag-BICAM na kami, nag-ratify na yung both houses. The Senate President and the Speaker at that time, Speaker Arroyo, already ratified the budget. But after ratification, yung enrolled bill na iba yung itsura. Inamend pa rin ng House. That's even worse. And when Senate President Soto signed the enrolled bill, naglagay siya ng reservation. Sabi niya, I'm only certifying as to the authenticity of the BICAM report that we ratified.
Yes.
Hindi kasama itong nabago. And we identified something like 75 billion plus. When it reached Malacanang and Malacanang further examined or scrutinized the enrolled bill, they found a total of 95 billion pesos in unauthorized appropriations or amendments made by the lower house.
Yeah.
Mas grabe yun. No?
Okay. But clearly the challenge is right now is, in a way, if the House tries to hide it, the Senate will find it. And it's costly to veto the budget again because of the circumstances that we live in today.
That is correct. Because, Karen, alam mo, pag nag-usap tayo ng problema, hindi matatapos. Ang problema ng government natin, not this year, ngayon lang, yung revenue, sa aspect ng revenue, mapipil natin ito next year. Why? Because ngayong taon na ito, walang kita ang tao. Walang kita yung mga corporations, yung MSMEs. More than 1 million of them. Ano? And 90+% yan, mga small and medium. Yung large corporations, nasa mga 4,000 lang yan eh. Napakaliit ng, or even less. Ano? Ngayon, sino yung magsusustain ng expenditure, ng gagastusin ng gobyerno? Because kung walang kita ang tao, babagsak yung income tax returns. Babagsak yung corporate income tax. Babagsak lahat yung collection, pati yung VAT because consumption is decreased. Now, next year, ITR tayo, Karen, siguro yung mga fixed income earners lang ang talaga makapag-government workers, for example, and yung mga hindi na retrenched. But how many people or how many workers in the private sector ang natanggal? So hindi magpapile ng income tax returns yun. So hindi pa natin, the worst is yet to come or is yet to be felt by Filipinos. That's what I'm saying. Okay. So pagdating ng 2021, yung revenue collection natin will be down.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the SAP, for example, the 2021 budget, it has, of course, the institutionalized CCT, pero it does not have social amelioration in it. I've interviewed, I think, Congresswoman Stella, and she said that will have to be in Bayanihan 3. Do you believe that it should be incorporated already in the 2021 budget? Some level of SAP or ayuda ang tawag, but assistance, whether it's for families, small business, it should be incorporated and focused in the 2021 budget?
Nasa bayanihan na yung SAP, Karen, no? And yung sa 2021, since resiliency na yung pag-uusapan, I don't think the executive department will still attend to yung social amelioration. Anyway, institutionalized na sabi mo yung CCT, di ba? Meron tayong 4Ps doon sa mga living below the poverty line. ang talagang tinamaan dito yung mga
Negosyo.
daily wage earners
Yes,
o mga negosyo.
Negosyo.
So kaya nga meron tayong pinapasa ng mga batas to attend to their needs, give them some incentives, tapos babaan yung corporate income tax, and so forth and so on. So medyo late in the day kung magsasapa tayo sa 2021. Kasi hindi na itututugma doon sa recovery phase noong reset, rebound, and recover. Kasi pang-emergency yung SAP, Karen.
What are you seeing as some areas in the budget that should be reduced, frankly? Like, for example, you said these local projects of multi-purpose halls. I also saw a lot of flood control projects, which are important, but then we know that flood control projects can also be very vague in terms of costing. So
and corruption prone,
So what are you seeing so that we can stick to 4.5 trillion and then fund more of the needed? I mean, there has to be sacrifices made, not just by agencies, but by local districts as well, coming from the DPWH fund.
As I said earlier, Karen, we have to see the final form of the House version of the budget bill before we can decide among ourselves kung ano yung i-reduce namin, alin yung tatanggalan, alin yung dadagdagan. Because we haven't seen it. October 28, parang nila papadala yung USB drive, yung soft copy. And then yung hard copy will follow. So until and unless we see the House version, the final House version of the budget measure, budget bill, then it's really difficult to say kung ano yung tatanggalin, ano yung dadagdagan na. For all we know, baka nadagdagan na rin nila. So pwedeng i-adapt, maski minimaintain namin na ang constitutional, but hindi pa naman talaga yung the entire General Appropriations Act as we will pass it. Hindi pa naman ang constitutional because hindi pa naman tapos yung ginagawa naming legislation ng 2021 budget.
Okay, my last question on the budget before we go to a quick break. But should congressmen prepare that they will have lesser locally funded projects under the DPWH? Should they prepare for that?
It depends on what kind of local projects, Karen. Kasi marami rin mga local projects na pwede rin mag-respond doon sa pandemic, yung sa needs ng sa COVID-19. So it really depends, and there's a lot of factors involved here. Hindi lamang yung hindi naman porket local ito, national ito, bawasan agad yung local. Is that what I really meant by
Yes.
when we scrutinize the budget? Maraming factors involved.
I'm curious, my last question. A provincial capital, for example, this was one of the controversial topics when I was interviewing congressmen. The provincial capital, should that be, frankly, in the national budget?
It could be in the national budget, pero it could take a backseat, especially now that we're still reeling from the effects of the pandemic, and we're trying to recover from the pandemic, from the effects of the pandemic.
Okay, all right. What kind of projects do you feel belong in the 2021 budget to stick to the theme?
Well, should belong.
Yeah, what
Yung bill should be there.
So
Kasi
national.
ito yung mag-spur din ng economy. Yeah, of course. I noticed also the ICT because kailangan i-build natin yung national broadband program ng bansa natin.
Yeah.
I'm the one sponsoring the budget of the ICT. During our committee hearing, they were asking for 18 billion para doon sa national broadband program. Binigay sa kanila 902.
Yeah.
And they trying to justify it by saying that ang laki na matitipid ng government pagka nabuo natin yung national broadband program. Ang for the first year, mahigit 700 million kagad yung savings. And within 5 years, ang masasave ng gobyerno, 34 billion. Kasi sa Wi-Fi service lang, imagine how many offices, how many agencies are subscribing to private internet service providers. Eh kung may sarili ng Wi-Fi service, free Wi-Fi service ang gobyerno, as in other countries, malaki talaga matitipid natin. Ang estimate ng DICT in 5 years time, 34 billion. With an investment of 18 billion, ang masisave in 5 years is 34 billion. Hindi ba magandang economics yun?
Yeah. So, Congressman Joey Salceda pointed that out. For broadband, it's mandated pero wala pang pondo. For agri, 42 billion mandated, wala pang pondo. So, it's fair,
Right.
Senator, na hahanapan nyo yun.
Correct. Pati yung sa free Wi-Fi service, nag-request sila ng, I think, 3 billion or 4 billion. Maliit din yung binigay sa kanila. Ito yung mga investment. Also sa research and development.
Okay.
DOST, tinanggalan din ng 76 billion. Ang research and development natin, wala tayong ginawa kundi mag-shopping. Samantala, pag research and development, di ba dapat, ang dami scholars eh.
Okay.
We were informed by DOST na we have so many scholars, yung mga scientists and researchers.
All right.
So why don't we just harness the homegrown talents na lang, Karen?
Okay. Senator Ping Lacson, I'm just